Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 62. Chapter 62. Kutuzov, accompanied by his adjutants, rode at a walking pace behind the Carabineers. When he had gone less than half a mile in the rear of the column, he stopped at a solitary, deserted house that had probably once been an inn, where two roads parted. Both of them led downhill, and troops were marching along both. The fog had begun to clear, and enemy troops were already dimly visible about a mile and a half on the opposite heights. Down below, on the left, the firing became more distinct. Kutuzov had stopped and was speaking to an Austrian general. Prince Andrew, who was a little behind looking at them, turned to an adjutant to ask him for field glass. "Look, look," said this adjutant, looking not at the troops in the distance, but down the hill before him. "It's the French!" The two generals and the adjutant took hold of the field glass, trying to snatch it from one another. The expression on all their faces suddenly changed to one of horror. The French were supposed to be a mile and a half away, but had suddenly and unexpectedly appeared just in front of us. "It's the enemy. No, you see it is, for certain, but how is that?" said different voices. With the naked eye, Prince Andrew saw below them to the right, not more than 500 paces from where Kutuzov was standing, a dense French column coming up to meet the Asferans. "Here it is, the decisive moment has arrived. My turn has come," thought Prince Andrew, and striking his horse, he rode up to Kutuzov. "The Asferans must be stopped, Your Excellency," cried he. But at that very instant a cloud of smoke spread all around, firing was heard quite close at hand, and a voice of naive terror barely 2 steps from Prince Andrew shouted, "Brothers, all's lost!" And at this, as if at a command, everyone began to run. Confused and ever-increasing crowds were running back to where 5 minutes before the troops had passed the emperors. Not only would it have been difficult to stop that crowd, it was even impossible not to be carried back with it oneself. Bolkonsky only tried not to lose touch with it, and looked around bewildered and unable to grasp what was happening in front of him. Nesvitsky, with an angry face, red and unlike himself, was shouting to Kutuzov that if he did not ride away at once, he would certainly be taken prisoner. Kutuzov remained in the same place, and without answering, drew a handkerchief. Blood was flowing from his cheek. Prince Andrew forced his way to him. "You are wounded?" he asked, hardly able to master the trembling of his lower jaw. "The wound is not here, it is here," said Kutuzov, pressing the handkerchief to his wounded cheek and pointing to the fleeing soldiers. "Stop them!" he shouted. And at the same instant, probably realizing that it was impossible to stop them, spurred his horse and rode to the right. A fresh wave of the flying mob caught him and bore him back with it. The troops were running in such a dense mass that once surrounded by them, it was difficult to get out again. One was shouting, "Get on! Why are you hindering us?" Another, in the same place, turned round and fired in the air. A third was striking the horse Kutuzov himself rode. Having by a great effort got away to the left from the flood of men, Kutuzov, with his suite diminished by more than half, rode toward a sound of artillery fire nearby. Having forced his way out of the crowd of fugitives, Prince Andrew, trying to keep near Kutuzov, saw on the slope of the hill, amid the smoke, a Russian battery that was still firing, and Frenchmen running toward it. Higher up stood some Russian infantry, neither moving forward to protect the battery, nor backward with the fleeing crowd. A mounted general separated himself from the infantry and approached Kutuzov. Of Kutuzov's suite, only 4 remained. They were all pale and exchanged looks in silence. "Stop those wretches!" gasped Kutuzov to the regimental commander, pointing to the flying soldiers. But at that instant, as if to punish him for those words, bullets flew hissing across the regiment and across Kutuzov's suite like a flock of little birds. The French had attacked the battery and, seeing Kutuzov, were firing at him. After this volley, the regimental commander clutched at his leg. Several soldiers fell, and a second lieutenant who was holding the flag let it fall from his hands. It swayed and fell, but caught on the muskets of the nearest soldiers. The soldiers started firing without orders. "Oh, oh, oh!" groaned Kutuzov despairingly and looked around. "Bolkonsky!" he whispered, his voice trembling from a consciousness of his feebleness of age. "Bolkonsky!" he whispered, pointing to the disordered battalion and at the enemies. "What's that?" But before he had finished speaking, Prince Andrew, feeling tears of shame and anger choking him, had already leapt from his horse and run to the standard. "Forward, lads!" he shouted in a voice piercing as a child's. "Here it is," thought he, seizing the staff of the standard and hearing with pleasure the whistle of the bullets evidently aimed at him. Several soldiers fell. "Hurrah!" shouted Prince Andrew, and scarcely able to hold up the heavy standard, he ran forward with full confidence that the whole battalion would follow him. And really he only ran a few steps alone. One soldier moved, and then another, and soon the whole battalion ran forward, shouting "Hurrah!" and overtook him. A sergeant of the battalion ran up and took the flag that was swaying from its weight in Prince Andrew's hands, but he was immediately killed. Prince Andrew again seized the standard and, dragging it by the staff, ran on with the battalion. In front he saw our artillerymen, some of whom were fighting, while others, having abandoned their guns, were running toward him. He also saw French infantry soldiers who were seizing their artillery horses and turning the guns round. Prince Andrew and the battalion were already within 20 paces of the cannon. He heard the whistle of bullets above him unceasingly, and to right and left of him soldiers continually groaned and dropped. But he did not look at them. He looked only at what was going on in front of him, at the battery. He now saw clearly the figure of a red-haired gunner with a shako knocked awry, pulling one end of a mop, while a French soldier tugged at the other. He could distinctly see the distraught yet angry expression on the faces of these 2 men, who evidently did not realize what they were doing. "What are they about?" thought Prince Andrew as he gazed at them. "Why doesn't the red-haired gunner run away, as he is unarmed? Why doesn't the Frenchman stab him? He will not get away before the Frenchman remembers his bayonet and stabs him." And really another French soldier, trailing his musket, ran up to the struggling men, and the fate of the red-haired gunner, who had triumphantly secured the mop and still did not realize what awaited him, was about to be decided. But Prince Andrew did not see how it ended. It seemed to him as though one of the soldiers near him hit him on the head with the full swing of a bludgeon. It hurt a little, but the worst of it was that the pain distracted him and prevented his seeing what he had been looking at. "What's this? Am I falling? My legs are giving away," thought he, and fell onto his back. He opened his eyes, hoping to see how the struggle of the Frenchmen and the gunners ended, whether the red-haired gunner had been killed or not, and whether the cannon had been captured or saved. But he saw nothing. Above him there was now nothing but the sky, the lofty sky, not clear yet, still immeasurably lofty, with gray clouds gliding slowly across it. How quiet, peaceful, and solemn! Not at all as I ran, thought Prince Andrew, not as we ran, shouting and fighting. Not at all as the gunner and the Frenchman with frightened and angry faces struggled for the mop. How differently do those clouds glide across that lofty, infinite sky! How was it I did not see that lofty sky before? And how happy I am to have found it at last! Yes, all is vanity, all falsehood, except that infinite sky. There is nothing, nothing but that. But even it does not exist. There is nothing but quiet and peace. Thank God. Alright, that concludes my reading of chapter 62 of War and Peace, one of my favorites in the entire novel. I'll now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 62. That Infinite Sky. Some men sleepwalk through life, while others sprint to their death. Prince Andrew is a sprinter. Stopping by a deserted house, General Kutuzov and his adjutant see that the morning fog has lifted. Normally, this would be a good thing. With the obscuring fog finally dissipating, Kutuzov can now survey the battlefield clearly and direct his army accordingly. Unfortunately for him, the lifting of the fog reveals that the French are already upon them. Everyone panics. A terrified confusion sets in. Shouts for retreat disturb the morning air. As the rest of the army degenerates into pandemonium, Prince Andrew realizes this is the opportunity he's been waiting for to make a hero out of himself. But what to do? He scans the area. Amid the madness, he sees that a second lieutenant has been shot and has dropped the flag he was holding. Prince Andrew pounces. He runs to the standard, picks it up, and charges forward. He implores his countrymen to join him in the attack. They do. They rush towards the battery, which is being run over by the French, who are turning the Russian cannons against the Russians. Prince Andrew takes note of a particular struggle between a Frenchman and a Russian. He wonders what will happen of this fight. But he's never given an answer because a projectile of some sort hits him in the head and he falls to the ground. Before consciousness slips away, he finds himself looking up at the sky above him. We've written before about how Tolstoy often pairs a scene of great human tragedy with a pastoral description of nature. Tolstoy's idea, as I see it anyway, is to highlight nature's indifference to the terrible human struggle. That's what's going on here. As Prince Andrew dies on the battlefield, surrounded by men butchering each other, the sky disinterestedly carries on. It's just as Thomas Ligotti writes of history in his short story, Professor Nobody's Little Lectures. Madness, chaos, bone-deep mayhem, devastation of innumerable souls. While we scream and perish, history licks a finger and turns the page. Throughout the novel so far, Prince Andrew has been the most thoughtful, the most reflective. And what, now that he's bleeding out on the field of Austerlitz, has the thinking obtained for him? What great truths did he find that brought him to this moment? Daily Meditation. I, the teacher, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is vanity, and a chasing after the wind. Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verses 12 through 14. All right, that concludes my reading and reflection on chapter 62 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. Links to all that are below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow we'll be reading and reflecting on chapter 63 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and of others.